Hey there, Knicks fans. Ooh, it's been a while. How you doing? It's your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast, coming at you on a Monday, February 28th. We are almost to March. We've been gone for a little bit. We skipped out on All-Star Weekend. We all got away, got our minds cleared, but we're back to get you covered as you've been waiting for. What follows is going to be wall-to-wall coverage and analysis of Obi Toppin's dominant slam dunk contest championship win thing. I took that bit as far as I could do it. Jeremy Cohen, hello. First of all, hello.
Hello, John.
Did you watch the dunk contest?
I did. That was the only thing I watched.
Did you really?
That was that weekend.
God
Yeah,
bless.
it was like I might as well. Obi's in it, and boy,
Did you enjoy it?
He was fun. No, not at all. I enjoyed Obi, but the rest of the competition was just terrible. It's unfortunate that Obi then has to be the recipient of a terrible dunk contest when he was good, but everyone else just couldn't do anything. So,
Jeremy, the moment I got off that plane, it would have needed to be like prime Michael Jordan, Dominique Wilkins, like David Thompson and Vince Carter competing to get me to watch that. I wanted to get as far away from forget about basketball. If I heard a ball bouncing, I was running in the other direction. That's how far I wanted to get away from this sport for at least a little while. So with apologies to Obi, did not count. I saw the winning dunk though, or the dunk he had over the guy who was, I don't even know who the guy was. Is it a friend of his?
not sure.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, listen. Unfortunately, not all of us could fly to paradise for the week. Some of us stuck it in the cold, had to deal with all sorts of brittle temperatures. I mean, that's not even the right word to use, but the point is,
brittle
like,
works. Yes.
yeah, listen, I got as far away from basketball for a week, and I won't lie, I definitely enjoyed it. Felt nice to just have my life back and not have to plan around this basketball team. Yeah. And I will do so again starting April 10th, or April 11th, I guess you should say. But in the meantime, I was like, all right, we finished whatever watching we were doing. Might as well just put on the dunk contest. And listen, do I regret it? 100%. But did I enjoy it? I did not. But did I enjoy Obi? Absolutely.
Good. Congratulations, Obi Toppin. That is the extent of the dunk contest coverage that we're going to be getting into on the show. I apologize if anybody wants to hear our reactions to that win. I'm happy for him. It's a nice thing for the kid. No, but I mean, I think we kind of, the place that you're talking about, right? Where it's like, just make it stop. I think we arrived at that place. Officially, we officially arrived at that place 2 weeks ago, which is the last time we recorded together, right? So right before Valentine's Day. And we have been living in that place now for 2 weeks. I feel like we're going to be here for another couple weeks before we are fully on to like not even like for instance today. So we're recording this after the Sixers game. Were you like rooting for them to win the game? Like how did you watch that game?
It was perfect for me, actually. I went to the game.
Did you? I didn't even know
did. I actually went with a Sixers fan. He was very civil. It was nice of him. But there were a lot of obnoxious Sixer fans, which honestly is probably a little redundant, to be quite honest. Just Philly fans in general are another. Philly fans are like Boston fans, but Boston fans have actually seen far more titles. So that's a huge difference. But I mean, it's just 100% true. There's just very aggressive energy, but they're passionate. So be it. But I was in a position where it's like, listen, I'm at this game. They win. I get to see all of these Philly fans just be devastated because they blew it. And that's great. And the young guys are playing for the most part. So, and more on that, obviously, but that felt great. And there's also, hey, well, if the Knicks lose, then we are at the point where wins or losses are wins, but you don't necessarily have to root for them. You can just kind of accept them after they happen as, well, this is a silver lining to that. Well, this is a silver lining to that. So I was rooting for the win, but if you told me, hey, the Knicks are going to lose this game, which, I mean, when it was close in the fourth quarter earlier on, I would have said like,
they had the lead in the fourth quarter.
Yes, they did. And it did not work that way, but that's fine. I had a great time at the game. The worst part, of course, was that there were more free throws than I could ever imagine. And I hated that. And I feel like I'm going to hate everything about the Sixers team because of the fact that it's just foul call after foul. There were like 6 possessions in a row where they kept getting the call, and I wanted to pull my hair out. And I don't like of all the teams in the East, the Sixers are not one of my most hated. So I'm fine with them going further this year, but applying it to the Knicks game, it was just enough. Please. This is absurd.
Other than the Nets, who obviously I despise. Oddly enougenough, I don't have a whole lot of hatred for any of the other teams that have it going right now.
It's the Celtics 100% for me.
I mean, if I guess
Celtics, really Heat, Bulls, Nets in that order.
I don't really, I can't muster up a lot of hatred. I think the Sixers are we'll get into this on Patreon, I'm sure, but I think the Sixers, I would pick them to win the title right now. I don't think that's even very controversial in any case. So let's start off by saying what has happened. A lot has happened actually since we last recorded a podcast. So going into the break, the Knicks had their worst loss of the season to the Thunder. I think it was a night or 2 nights after having their worst loss of the season to the Blazers. And then it was followed by the worst loss of the season to the Nets. And then they went away. And then they just came back with some like just regular old losses to the Heat and Sixers. Like, again, we're at the point where I don't even know how to talk about like it. So Andrew, God bless you, Andrew. Next to week in review, he puts parentheses LOL. Because that's like, what else do you say? Do I say LOL or should I say LOL?
LOL works. Yeah.
Okay. Because I know some of the kids now, I think they say just LOL. Anyway, Andrew's giving me is that a stink face? I think.
What? Jeremy, you're closer to the kids. Is that a thing? LOL?
I mean, I remember back in like middle school, early high school age, maybe you'd say lols with a Z at the end, but you wouldn't exactly.
I think it's
maybe sometimes some people would say lol, but it's not like,
okay,
you spell it out for the most part.
I'm not going to say.
Well, like you say LMFAO, you don't say LMFAO, you know? You say OMG, you don't say
Jeez, Jeremy.
I don't think any of these things are coming out of JFK's mouth.
You don't say JFK.
You do not, or maybe it's GIF.
Yeah, that's right. Depends how you pronounce it.
It is the portion of the season where we have moved up
soft J, like
the JFK
like jogging
to the first half of the episode. Okay. Anyway, I mean, how do you like? We could sit here and be like, well, if the last 4 games the Knicks have played, like they were up on the Thunder and lost, and they were up big on the Nets and lost, and what were they down by like 2 going into the fourth quarter to the Heat and lost, and they had a fourth quarter lead against the Sixers. And that's like, it just feels very disingenuous to try to analyze this team as a genuine competitive entity right now. Right? Do we need to do that? I don't think we do.
Listen,
right?
if you're going to talk about JFK, I have a very good explanation here.
Please.
So it started off where the Knicks needed to be careful, but it was a nice day out. Things were going well. So they ditched the bulletproof car. It's convertible now. It's fine. They're rolling. Things are going great. Everything's nice. And then we all know what happened after that. That's essentially how it worked out.
Are you saying that there was a bulletproof covering that could have prevented this season from turning into what it has been?
I absolutely am saying that. Yes. There are multiple ways they could have prevented against this season. And it's from the top down 100%. And it reverberates everywhere, but it's front office, it's coaching, it's players. It's again, you can say for all of them that there's guilt somewhere. You can pick and choose where you want to assess it. But at the end of the day, I think for all 3 of them, there's at least a level of culpability. And that's just where we are at now.
Let's get into it. Good transition. So since we've last spoken, shall we say some blame has been distributed? Primarily, we have not talked since the rumor came out. Not rumor, since the report came out that how should we put this? The powers that be, perhaps William Worldwide West, has been speaking to his good friend James Dolan about perhaps why the season has gone awry. As an ambulance fittingly drives my apartment, and I don't know if you could hear that. And James Dolan's the name that has been whispered to James Dolan's ear is Tom Thibodeau. So count William Wesley among the chorus of Knicks fans who have put at least some of the blame for this season on Coach Tibbs. And then shortly thereafter, we learned that Kemba Walker would be shut down for the season. And that was a long time coming. The Kemba conversation is interesting to me, and we'll get to it in a second, because I think you could relate the Kemba thing to Tibbs, because Tibbs kept trotting him out there when it clearly wasn't working. And you could also relate the Kemba thing more directly to the men who signed Kemba Walker, which is the front office, which I know you have some thoughts about, which I want to get to in a second. And then I feel like we'd be remiss to not at least mention that following a nice couple of weeks of basketball, Julius Randle has emerged from the All-Star break, which shockingly he did not participate in the All-Star festivities, with a combined 6 for 28 shooting performance over the 2 games in which he's back. So the Julius Randle that we've come to know and love is from the first 50 some odd games of this year is back. It's not great. And then some fingers of blame are being pointed at the front office as well. And you wrote about that recently, and I'm curious to get into that, but okay, we're 3-15 in the last 18 games. We'll talk about the lottery standings in a second, but what do you have one big picture takeaway from the last couple of weeks as far as where this thing has devolved to, or, where are you at?
Yeah. So I wrote this article about the front office, and
which was excellent, by the way, for the Strickland.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And it's basically just conveniently, it talks about the Thunder and the Sixers, 2 teams that the Knicks happen to play since we last spoke, and who are certainly further along in their processes. The Sixers obviously are a contender. The Thunder are a worse team, but better set up for future success. And the entire article is essentially that those 2 organizations are just 2 examples of teams that had something to work with in the past, and they turned past drafting, free agency, trades, all of that into something that we see today. And the Knicks have been unable to really do that because they've just consistently been left with nothing. And so this front office, as a result, has had to basically play with nothing. Sam Hinkie took over and traded Drew Holiday, and then continued the process onward. Sam Presti, his first move was trading Ray Allen and getting Jeff Green in return. And that was when Jeff Green was the 5th pick overall and a highly coveted. They had Kevin Durant. They would get Russell Westbrook and James Harden and Serge Ibaka, and that certainly set them up for success.
So some luck involved there too. I know
100% of luck, and the lottery odds were very different, and that's where the luck comes in too.
Yep.
And then you look at the Knicks and where this front office started, and again, it's RJ Barrett with a bad rookie season. It's Julius Randle, dubious handles that people wanted just gone. It's Mitchell Robinson, who was not a starter at the time, part of it because of DeAndre Jordan, just seniority, and part of it because you just couldn't stop fouling people. That was essentially it. I mean, if we think about the castaways, the used up picks, the fact that from 2010 to 2018, it really is very little that the success the Knicks have had that has turned into long-term success, right?
They didn't trade really Kristaps
Porzingis. Oh no, it was disgustingly bad. And Leon Rose did not get to trade Kristaps Porzingis. And because of the fact, I guarantee you, if Leon Rose were trading Porzingis at that time, Jalen Brunson would be a Knick right now. There's just no question about it. They would have done what they could to have gotten Jalen Brunson because of the fact that he would have seen this player who he has a personal connection to and all that. But instead of rewriting history and whatnot, the point here is that there's just so little that they operated with. And this front office is now paying for the sins of previous regimes. And when it's we want a point guard, of course, we all want a point guard. But the reality is it's been 2 years of this regime without a point guard versus 15 since Stephon Marbury, which was 6-7 regimes prior. So it's the sort of thing where it's trying to assess all of these differences. And this week, especially with the Rose injury and Kemba getting benched, I feel like a lot of that came to a head where fans then kind of relitigate the whole free agency 2021 situation, calling it a disaster, calling it the worst thing ever. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say this is great and everything's fine. I won't. But it's really not as bad as it seems. I just sat in a game where Evan Fournier once again did what he's been doing since Thanksgiving. But he's just been inconsistent. That's the one issue.
But that's Evan Fournier, and that's what he's always been.
Right. So I shouldn't say one issue, but that is the chief issue that we've been dealing with here.
Yeah, and we can pick nits I mean, there's a lot we could pick Knicks about, but like you could pick Knicks about, pick Knicks, about Fournier's, about, you know, whether Fournier was the right fit for the team. I actually think there's a world where he could fit in really well if he was the primary addition and it wasn't accompanied by the Kemba Walker signing. It's really interesting because you kind of, not that you glossed over it, but you gave the Kemba signing its due. But I do think it's important to point out, and we should spend a minute here because like it came up on the postgame today. Like I brought it up because I look at the Kemba signing as the moment that this season started to go downhill, because I think you could relate a lot of the Randall issues back to that potentially, because that's who he was forced to kind of change his game to accommodate this guy who's been used to having the ball in his hands for his whole career. I think the Tibbs, Randall, Kemba trifecta was doomed to start from the moment, you know, it began. And it's like, I think the conversation about where to place blame on the front office and all of this is really tough, because I think they deserve a lot of credit last season for empowering a guy like Tibbs and making him feel like he has a voice in the organization, because one, I think you get more buy-in from him, but two, I think it really did solidify, like the buck stopped with him, and you got accountability across the board, first and foremost from Julius Randle. And then you fast forward to this year, and now not only with Randle, but with Tibbs, you're living with the monster that you created. And all of a sudden, the Kemba Walker opportunity comes along. I think we all sitting here right now believe that Tibbs probably did not want to sign Kemba Walker. But he's here. And what do you do when all of a sudden the guy that you've empowered and has gotten you to this point objects to a move, and then the move starts to go badly, and then he acts on the move going bad? Like, all of these things started to trickle out. And just like you're not going to sit here and argue that the front office did a great job, I'm not going to sit here and argue that Tom Thibodeau has done a great job. Nobody's blameless. But it's just interesting how all of these things that were including with Randle, found success last year, it's kind of come apart. And I honestly, I don't think that there's one finger of blame. I think it's a lot of fingers, and they should all be pointed at all of these different parties. And it's everybody kind of shares in it equally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing with Kemba, I'm with you on the player and the impact, but I think the timing might be a little different. I know Schwinn talked about this on the pod recently, but the fact is, it kind of, to me, it felt like, and to him as well, the moment was maybe when he was benched and how that then affected everyone. Because I think the signing, I'm with you, but it's also then like, well, Tibbs, in terms of running an offense, like, it still bothers me that he did not kind of mold the offense more around the players and basically, like, you're going to do this, and you're not going to run a lot of pick and roll. We're not going to get creative. And I think that
he didn't successfully do that. We don't know whether or not there was more of an attempt to mold the offense of the players, and perhaps he was met with resistance, which, by the way, if he tried to do something as the head coach and then he couldn't get it done, that's still on him because he's the head coach.
Right. Yeah. Again, one of the things I know you've said a lot of is kind of like, we don't know what Tibbs has had to deal with, but I feel like we're kind of looking at that in the sense of positivity, where not so much positivity, where it's like, look, we don't know, his back could have been against the wall, but we also don't necessarily know the other side of it, which is all the things that could have gone wrong that he may have done, which
For
are,
sure.
And I feel like with that said, it's like the Kemba benching, the fact that we heard afterwards about players feeling like certain other guys had longer leashes, and
I'll say it. He handled it terribly.
He did 100%. And I think that is probably, you could call that the final nail in the coffin. I think honestly, the losses are going to be key, but that's the thing for me. Tibbs coming into this year, if you told me that the Knicks were going to have a losing season, I would say that's fine. Like, I hear you. I get it. Doesn't mean you have to fire Tom Thibodeau. And the reason for that being, it's like you had a great season where you overachieved. You had a worse season where you were below expectations. You're not at neutral, but you're essentially close to it. And this isn't just losing. And I know you're not pushing back on that. And I want to go back to what I'm saying in the first place, but the fact of it where it feels like it starts there because then it affects Kemba. And then after Kemba, it affects everyone else. And then long story short, we see a lot of losing. And I think that's the thing, is that the Kemba Walker signing, and I will maintain this till my dying day, was a low risk signing. it became high risk when they tried to make something that wasn't working continue to work. I understand why Tibbs then said, well, let's get Kemba out of here. I think there's politics here at play. If there's one thing that this front office has done a great job of, it's trying to make parties happy and be content. But that just didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen. And that is where it started to really all go wrong. The
one thing I just want to say, sorry, something popped up on my computer saying you have to restart it. So I lost my train of thought. We're back now. It's snooze. Don't worry.
That's what happened with Tibbs. That
exactly.
Every time that Tibbs has done something questionable, something popped up on his computer that says it had to restart. That's
100%. And I just think that, because it's fascinating. At a certain point, the Knicks and Tibbs diverged. If you look at that, they were in lockstep in a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
They obviously didn't agree on everything. There's a reason why, Tibbs would have wanted to trade young players for win now vets, and the Knicks pushed back on that. I think also Tibbs has this habit of burning bridges, and it's okay when you're winning, but it's not great later. For example, I feel like the Aller stuff, the Brock Aller, they like calling him hinky, and then essentially trying to go in the opposite direction where it's maybe not the most thinking with your head. Maybe it's thinking more with your gut. I think that probably there's a lot of push and pull here. And I just think that probably every step of the way, Tibbs has somehow found a way to mess it up. But the front office then didn't give him the quality that he may feel he wanted. And it just goes back and forth. Like, we're seeing younger players. There's zero chance that Tibbs was like, you know what? I'm totally cool with playing younger guys.
And I guarantee you, Tibbs's viewpoint through all of this is like, if you gave me the team that I wanted, this wouldn't be happening this year.
But that's the thing about the team that he wanted, right? It's like everyone came back plus Fournier, or almost everyone came back. And Bullock was Fournier and Kemba was Alfred Payton. And you would think that that's what he needs. Those are the upgrades he wants. And, I know that we can Monday morning quarterback this a lot of the times. We could say DeMar DeRozan and point to the fact that he is probably the worst floor spacer on his team right now. And if he came to New York, he might be the third best. And we could say he'd have a very good impact, but it would not be anywhere near the level of what it is now, because Vucevic is just a really good center and can open up a lot of things. We even saw it with Fournier in Orlando.
I don't disagree with that. I don't think like if DeRozan was here, they'd be like they'd be like a playoff team, for instance.
No, of course not. But I mean, they'd be probably closer to play-in territory for sure. But at that point, I would agree. Like, what are you going for? Then it would be like the Knicks paid all this money to DeMar DeRozan to essentially have a play-in tournament where they lose. What are they doing? But then it obviously goes to Lonzo Ball. And the one thing I want to say about Ball, I think he's a very good player. I understand why the Bulls paid him. But if you are, not you specifically, but if you're out there and you have a big problem with the Knicks paying guys who are injured, and yet you still feel like you really wanted the Knicks to pay Lonzo Ball, it feels a bit hypocritical to me. And the reason I say that is because if you go back to when he entered the league, Nerlens Noel has played in more games than Lonzo Ball has. Now, has Lonzo Ball logged more minutes? Yes. Is he a better player? 100%. But you can't play both sides of that. And I think that it's like, if you had said at the time the Knicks should do all these things, they look great. Even me, I'll put myself out there. I said that DeMar DeRozan was a worse signing than Kemba Walker for the amount that he got. Clearly, I was very wrong on that, like 100% wrong, and I deserve to be told that was the case. Completely fine, admitting that because it's just the truth. But it's the sort of thing of fit and expectations, and like when you're paying Derrick Rose, you're probably going to get 50 games if you're lucky. That's just the way it's been his last 4 or 5 seasons,
and they've gotten unlucky,
and that they have, and. Again, it's taking pieces that don't necessarily fit where they should. Like today with Alec Burks, didn't need to play him as many 34 minutes, I believe. I think,
he played 34 minutes.
That's the sort of thing that infuriates fans, and I think Tibbs has gotten better at it, but it's not by choice.
No,
I better at it in terms of like Jericho Sims coming off the bench, or
which may not be by choice because we learned today that Nerlens Noel is apparently dealing with plantar fasciitis. I don't think anyone is sitting here pretending like Tibbs is playing the guys he's playing now in terms of giving the younger players a little bit more time, not a lot more time, a little bit more time. But as you said, Burke's still playing 34 minutes. I don't think anyone's pretending like that's his ideal situation.
No.
it's just very interesting to me that Thibodeau, because of who he is and because he's so stubborn, and it has a lot of conviction that his ways are the best way to go about doing things. We are reliving his foibles every game. And it is a slow digging of the grave that is going to get him fired. Like, let's just call it like it is. Like, he is not, whether he gets fired in the next 2 weeks, whether he gets fired after the season is over, whether they, for some reason, keep him on into the beginning of next year. And look, I'm the foremost Tom Thibodeau fan and supporter. And even I think it would be, I would be worried if he did not get canned after the season, because I think they'd be opening themselves up to, like, what are we doing here? Like, you're okay. So you're going to keep him on, but like, clearly there's a lack of confidence. So just either rip the Band-Aid off, or like, you can't have it both ways. But like, he is digging his own grave with all of these game after game after game, same stuff. It's not working. They've lost, again, 15 of 18 games. You cannot say, well, he's trying to win games when you're losing games. But I still don't think he deserves to have the finger of blame pointed at him any more than the other parties involved here, including the front office, because the fact of the matter is they got to make their bed only, 3 times, right? The draft, free agency, and then the trade deadline. The trade deadline, one thing happened. They got Cam Reddish. We'll see. We'll see what happens. He's certainly not a player that is making the team look much better now. Maybe he would be if he was getting a little bit more time. I remain a little bit dubious of that. And then free agency worked the way it worked, and it got the team, to where it is. And then the other parties that be are the players. And a lot of the attention has been focused on Julius Randle, but no one has absolved the blame, including, by the way, RJ Barrett, who during the portion of the schedule where they should have been racking up wins, when he was going out there and shooting whatever God knows what percentage he was shooting, like, that hurt them, that they had a guy who was supposed to be a floor space, and, Fournier and like Walker, and it goes, on and on and on down the line. It's all bad. None of it's good. None of it's fun. And that's why we are transitioning to the portion of the season where we have to look at lottery standings. And like, that's where it's at. And I think in terms of like what the hope is, other than that, like, the young players play well and they get a good pick out of the season, I think the hope has to be that they haven't fractured this thing to the point of no return, where like they can make a move or a trade or whatever and get it back to the point where it was last year. And that's the only place that I'll push back on your defense of the front office, is because, like, yes, they were coming from nowhere, but they also got somewhere. And so it's like, when I don't gamble a lot, but like, if you go to a casino with $100 in your hand and you get up to 1,000 and then you leave with 200, like, did you have a good night?
Yeah, you walked out with $200.
You walked out with $200, right? But you also lost 800.
Sure. Yes. But I think that's the difference between us in terms of looking at the finger pointing. Like, I don't think it's uniform in terms of the levels of, again, I think all 3 parties that we've just talked about deserve blame. The reason I feel it's more Tibbs focused is it's kind of like, yes, he's working with the pieces he has, but he also neglected to make those pieces fit in a way that could have worked. Like, it's frustrating to me as a fan.
You're assuming they could have worked.
I am, because there's no trial. It's basically, he's manipulated the ability to experiment by saying, well, we're not going to try this other stuff. It could work, fair. but what we're doing now is what's working. And I think that's the biggest issue for me, was just, there are other pieces that you can work with, but he chooses not to. And he goes with the same tired bull crap that we've seen. And it's infuriating, because it's like insanity doing the same thing over and over again and feeling like we're being gaslit when we want to see change, but there's no change available. And so everything stays the same. And it's the inflexibility, it's the stubbornness that I think you, for example, kind of grew to appreciate. And I think we all sort of were like, oh, that's just stubborn Tibbs, and it was great when they're winning, and when they're losing, it's very ugly and gross. And it's just like, it felt like, I felt like I was being gaslit when it's Tibbs talking about these blown leads being because of younger players and inexperience. And then you see the Knicks have the younger players leading a comeback against Philadelphia, and Alec Burks subs in and the game is over. And it's moments
I
like
think
that
that's a little bit oversimplistic.
But it's not, though, because the fact when you look at who was on the court and how we've seen 2 games in a row where it was Obi and Randall. This game was a little bit more because of foul trouble. Before it wasn't quite there, but still he didn't have to go there. He did. He decided to. He could have put Taj Gibson in for all we know.
He could have.
He didn't. And I think it's him being pushed into a different direction. And it's the pressure that needs to get him to the place where we are satisfied. And it took until game 58, 59. I don't even remember what record the Knicks have right now, but it's been like that. That's how many games
I think they've played
taken.
60 games.
Good. Only 22 more. But
only 22 more.
That is my primary issue. It's the inflexibility that then comes to bite him in the ass. And I don't think we can look at it and be like, well, it's kind of on everyone. Sure, it is. But we don't have to say it's a 33.3% split for all of the parties, right? Like all of these second round picks, the guys taken from 31 to 40, there are players who are playing for their team and having significant roles, like Herbert Jones on the Pelicans.
Big role.
Ayo Dosunmu, he's doing great.
Dosunmu is awesome for Chicago.
Yeah. And I just see Deuce McBride doing everything that he needs to do on a G League level. And then it's like, well, we're rolling with Alec Burks for 30 plus a night.
And it is the uncertainty of the unknown again that is going to get him in all likelihood fired at some point in the not too distant future.
And it shouldn't because the fact that I see people who push back on Deuce McBride and basically like, well, what if he's bad? Then we know he's bad. But if we don't play him, then we can't see it.
Yeah, but
I would rather take the risk of seeing. I think a lot of fans would.
That a lot of fans would. That's not how any coach operates. And that's not exclusive.
You say that's not how coaches operate. And yet I see Willie Green playing Herbert Jones. I see Billy Donovan playing Dosunmu. I see even Jakubaitis, who has taken 34th, right?
Yeah.
He's playing somewhere else and getting significant minutes there. It's not the NBA, but it's the second best league in the world. And he's doing just fine. And then I look at Deuce and he does everything he has to do in the G League level. And the Knicks keep saying, well, we don't have a point guard. Okay, well, you've taken Kemba Walker out of the equation. Derrick Rose has still continued to be hurt. It's great to see Emmanuel quickly have a game like today, which is why I don't understand why people, not you obviously, but in general, like why they give up on these younger players. And that's of course the fear
nonsense.
With Deuce McBride, where it's like, let Deuce have whatever games he has. If he's great, great. If he's bad, cool. He can use his learning experience. It doesn't mean like he's trash. We should never associate with him whatsoever. And it's that inability to say, hey, maybe the younger players can actually help me here. That is so maddening. And that's going to lead to Tibbs' downfall.
Again, any argument, any leg that anyone who's in my shoes that wants to try to put forth this argument, any leg that we had left to stand on was gone weeks ago. Because at this point, the record is what it is. The recent stretch is what it is. The tenor of the season is what it is. So the notion that like, I'm not going to do it because I don't see enough to justify it to myself to do it. I'm paraphrasing Tibbs' thinking here. Kind of goes by the wayside when you are 3-15 in your last 18 games and you're whatever they are, 10 games under 500 and you're 4.5 or 5 or whatever. It doesn't even matter out of the 10th seed, in a play-in race that I'll put in like big air quotes because it's not really a race. It's like, who's the most mediocre, right? It's like it doesn't matter. Like this isn't the same thing as like competing for the 4 seed last year. So whatever. We'll see what happens. I trust that we're going to get to see Deuce McBride at some point. I don't think it's probably going to be before we record our next podcast, but you never know. I've been surprised before. Anything before we go on to give out game ball and talk about, I guess, some happier things. Anything else we need to touch on? I mean, like there's some things here, like what are the things that are more likely to happen than Kemba Walker ever playing another game for the Knicks? Me playing a game for the Knicks, I think it's more likely to happen. Andrew Claudio, former very, very talented contact hitter, getting a call up to play for the Mets that are not going to take the field this year because there's not going to be any baseball. I think that's more likely to happen.
Shane Falco, baby. The replacements are on their way for this upcoming baseball season.
Andrew Claudio becoming the Shane Falco of the 2022 New York Mets is more likely to happen than Kemba Walker playing another game. You, Jeremy Cohen, getting a suntan is more likely to happen than Kemba Walker ever playing another game for the New York Knicks.
There is a period between my mayonnaise pasty complexion and the lobster that I become. It's a very small window, but it does happen.
If you want to know, by the way, what all of this is in reference to, check out our new pregame show, which is available for all Monroe and Ewing tier patrons right now over on the KFS Patreon. Continue, John, with things more likely to happen than like baseball being played next month.
There you go. Yeah, I don't think Kemba's done. I don't know where he's going to be playing next year, but it's not going to be in New York. We talked about the Sims thing. That's something we wanted to touch on, the fact that Sims is in the rotation ahead of Noel and Taj. Like, I don't know. Is it a turning of the corner for Tibbs at this point? Does it even matter? We kind of already just had that conversation. I don't really think it does.
Sims matters for the front office.
Sure. Yeah.
And because the fact that he's under a 2-way contract next year. So the question for them will be, do we keep him on a 2-way or do we break that contract and try to sign him to a big league contract this summer?
I think, and this is where it's one of those, I won't matter because he's not like, his level of play hasn't been so substantial that he would refuse to do this. But like we've seen in the past few weeks, and the Knicks did this, in fact, with Alonzo Trier, teams break a contract in the middle of the season and convert it to something because they have a part of their exception left. Well, the Knicks don't have, and I don't believe so, unless I'm completely misremembering.
The only way they can sign Sims to a big league contract is if they give him a 2-year minimum.
Yes.
And one of those years would be this year. So you're basically 100 games,
which would
games are pointless.
Which would not be the case if they had an exception to use, but they don't have any more of the exception. But that's fine because again, it's not like Jericho Sims is playing himself into some crazy deal. They could keep him around long term if they want to, and they should because he's a good NBA player. We should touch just before we move on. A couple of notable players in the league have their names have come up. Players who do not play for the Knicks have come up in connection with the Knicks / the rest of the league. Of course, I'm talking about Zion Williamson and Donovan Mitchell. So I guess we can talk about Zion first. He does not want to be in New Orleans. It's become pretty evident. I don't know the latest thing was the whole CJ McCollum. He never called or texted them to welcome to the team. And then they did the whole news story on it. And then Zion, I guess, picked up the phone. This thing is going to come to a head, whether it's July 1st, July 2nd, July 3rd, July 10th, July 15th, whenever Woj sends the tweet that says, after some initial discussions, the New Orleans Pelicans and Zion Williamson are unable to agree to a contract extension. Whatever that tweet comes out, that's when it comes to a head. In the meantime, is this something we need to talk about right now, Jeremy? Do you think?
Not really. This is definitely more of an off-season topic. But I mean, I understand why Pelicans fans are upset. I saw a Mardi Gras parade that had Zion Williamson and said 1 ton and made fun of his weight and all that stuff. And I see where they're coming from. Obviously, I think there's also a ton of details we do not have. But we as fans, we lived through the Kristaps Porzingis era. We know red flags when we see one, or at least I would hope we are trained to see it. And I think it can be twofold, right? Like I saw Joel Embiid today looking like an MVP, and he had some serious injuries when he was younger and he looks just fine. Does it mean he's going to play 82 games a year? No, he's not. And I asked my friend who I went to the game with, who's a Sixers fan, I said, every time you see Joel Embiid, do you get worried that he's going to get hurt? And he said, yes. Every single time he steps onto the court, a part of me is terrified. And then when Embiid went down very briefly, and fortunately for him, he was okay. Yeah. You could hear all of these Sixers fans in attendance just holding their breath.
Of course.
And that's the stressful. You can say that about any player, right? It's a contact sport. We saw it with Quentin Grimes, and my heart was in my, I just couldn't believe it. And it's like, great. It's only 2 weeks. It seems maybe they'll take it easy. Who knows? But like, even just seeing that, there's genuine fear.
What about one that weighs that is the same height as RJ Barrett and outweighs RJ Barrett by 100 pounds. What about that player?
That's the thing. Yeah. But you're right. And that it will be this summer, right? We're either going to hear two things. One, he agrees to a 5-year max, or two, he does not agree to a contract, in which case things get really interesting because the Pelicans do not want to be in the position where they have to trade him at the point where KP was traded around the deadline of his 4th year. And they don't want to have to deal with the qualifying offer and him getting restricted free agency. And I don't think Zion wants to get to restricted free agency and have to make that decision, because then it's like, well, I could make the qualifying offer and still make all this money from endorsements. But
we know
it doesn't make
it's not going to get to that. It's not going to get to that. We know it's not going to get to that. It would never get to that. The only question I have is how active a role, because the bluff is going to come in, not for New Orleans. The bluff is going to come in to potentially scare off prospective suitors this summer, where like how much are, because again, New Orleans is going to trade him unless they get a package that they feel good about. So if Zion's like, yeah, even if I get traded to your city X, I'm not going to be any more likely to re-sign there either. So it's like, this is going to get messy as far as what the Knicks should do about it. I mean, I think you got to either be in or out on him as the player, and I guess to a certain extent as the person, because I do think that has to do with like, does he give a shit about being a great basketball player and the things that entails? And you, Andrew, we don't know the answer to that question. I'm sure the medical has to do with a little bit too. I mean, look, I think if the price is right, I would say you have to make a play for him. What is that price? There's no one on this team. I'll say this. There was no one on this team that I would say is untouchable other than Barrett in a Zion trade discussion. I'll say that. And then as far as what the picks have to do with that is, that gets a little bit interesting because New Orleans already has all the picks in the world that they could possibly want. And how much more can they possibly want to deal with? Because then it gets to a point where, as the issue we've been talking about with the Knicks upcoming with having too many draft assets, we'll multiply that by about 5 with New Orleans. So I don't know.
Well, we saw with KP, the whole bluffing situation. He put a list of teams he wanted to go to. Yeah. The fact that he was rehabbing in Spain, that he was not going to come back.
That was dealt with fast, though. Offer. This will be more drawn out, and it won't be.
But then KP at least played in more than 85 games over a 3-year span. And you're looking at it, you see how good he is when he's healthy. It's the when he's healthy part that is going to scare off a lot of teams. And you also know, like, okay, if I acquire Zion and I don't want him here, and he has generational wealth as is, and he takes the qualifying offer, and the Knicks have all these team options on guys like Alec Burks, Nerlens Noel, Derrick Rose, who may not even be here next year regardless. Yeah. They can find a way to create max cap space for signing this player outright. And then if you're that team, it's like, well, I'm taking the risk on it, but do I necessarily want to give up this haul to get Zion, hope he's healthy enough for the 4th year, and then deal with him potentially signing a qualifying offer, having a no trade clause, and then I lose him for nothing? That is the risk. And Zion will play it how he wants to. CAA will play it how they want to. They will find a way to make whatever they want to happen, because this is a league run by stars. It also doesn't mean that the Pelicans necessarily have to abide by that. But it's sort of like, well, if you're not going to trade us to a team like the Knicks, if this is a place where he does want to be, and it seems like he would, then he can easily say, well, I if I want to get there, I will force my way. And if he wants to get somewhere else and he's happy there, then he'll stay there. I don't want us to. I really hated what Stan Van Gundy was talking about this past week.
Yeah, I didn't care for that either.
Where it was like, listen, the whole thing about stars, I understand you could call us media to an extent, because that's essentially, we're in the Knicks universe. This is what we do.
That doesn't feel right.
It doesn't, but that's just kind of the situation that we're in. And so that's why I want us to obviously be as cautious as possible when we talk about this, where it's media driven, but it's also us responding to what was said there. And we wouldn't talk about this unless we felt it was warranted of a conversation. But the idea where it's like 20 years, okay, well, again, Melo was 2011. Like, granted, that's a long time ago, 100%. But a lot of the way that we have been talking about this, and the reason why we haven't talked about these stars, is because all we really want is to see a team that is being built from the ground up. And when the time comes where it's appropriate for us to talk about these stars, we talk about it. That's why I have done everything out of my power to be like, these are hypotheticals, not what I want to do when, we can do it, that I try to be as cautious as possible. I know you do too, because we don't want to come off as like those types of people who then inspire and then are let down. We just want to say, these are the situations, here's how they can approach it. And that's why it's only now that it's going to be like, we'll talk about it. We probably won't talk about it for a while, and that'll be great because then we can focus on other things that are more tangible. But I guess
like whether we could have a worse record than the Pacers.
Exactly. But I guess if we're done with Zion, just quickly move on to the other target.
Yeah, no, just real briefly on Donovan Mitchell. Steve Popper had a note in his comment in his column on Sunday saying that Worldwide West, William Wesley, part of his grand plan is to eventually trade for Donovan Mitchell, which there's some insinuation about, that's perhaps part of the reason why Johnny Bryant is here. Maybe why Johnny Bryant's going to be taking over for Tom Thibodeau, as he should get that opportunity if and when the time comes. Like, look, my response to this is no shit, and that's let me be very clear. That's not directed at Steve Popper. Steve Popper is or his reporting. It's just the notion that like, no shit, William Worldwide West has sold James Dolan on the notion that he is going to get a star in here at some point in time as my daughter comes to sit on my lap. Anything else you want to say about Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. To me, it all depends on pricing for all of these guys, right? I mean, like the thing with Zion is we have an idea with Porzingis for what maybe Zion costs, but then we don't because of the injury factor, playing fewer games and more of a question mark potentially. It's the Mitchell part where then it's like, if you do a big trade, you do it as like the final piece, but now we're talking about trading for two guys in this situation. So it's tough to analyze, but I think it's ultimately just not this year. It's probably 2023. That's when you can circle that for how it makes the most sense. Maybe with Utah, they implode and things are bad and it goes downhill. But if you look at all these big players, it's very often where it's when they have 2 years of team control that they then start to make their move.
It's always been 2 years until someone forces it to be more than 2 years.
Right. And a lot of people are pointing to Donovan Mitchell having that 2025 player option. Folks, he's going to decline it. And the reason he's going to decline it is because that's the year that the cap will increase substantially and he's going to want to get paid as a result. So like if you're thinking, oh, well, he's got 3 years or 4 years left on his deal, I guess it would be 4. He doesn't really, it's really just the amount that's team control. He will opt out the moment he can and secure more money. And that's, if you look at that 2 years, that's when the 2023 draft is. That's why it's going to be so fascinating to see what the Knicks do with their pick this year, how they go about with the other players on the roster, how they even get a lead guard, because again, like you need to make the upgrade there. Maybe you can then bring Donovan Mitchell into the fold. It could be to replace that player. It could be to complement that player, whatever it is. But you have to make an upgrade in some way, and then you can parlay whatever you need to into that player. But until then, we get to talk about this team and what this team will do, and I'm okay with that.
And that's a great transition, actually, to game balls. So game ball we give out to the person or personality that needs to be given some extra credit for their performance this week. I'm gonna go rogue here and go off script because I'm gonna do away with the formality of like, who is it, me? Look, we are, if it's all right with you, Jeremy.
It's fine. I was looking at Andrew's face. It was very funny.
There's one candidate.
I was about to say we're not going through like the who's Jeremy going to give it to? It's like RJ Barrett is going to get Knicks Film School's game ball for this week. That's what I just wanted to say.
Good.
And I think the only thing I want to say about this is, as someone who, as recently as two and a half months ago, had genuine curiosity. I'll be kind to myself and use that word, as to whether RJ Barrett was ever going to be able to be a number 3 option on a really good team. What we've seen, I think, in his return from injury, and really this has been a couple months in the making, all of those conversations are out the window. And now I think we're not at the point where it's like, oh, we don't need Donovan Mitchell because we have RJ Barrett. Like no.
It's the opposite.
No, yeah, exactly.
Because you have RJ Barrett. Yeah. That is the reason to
go get Donovan Mitchell. I will say this though. and this is, I hope this doesn't come off as a slight to RJ, because I mean it is anything but. I mean it as a compliment. I think we're at the point where we need to consider, like, not like acquiring a player who's going to fit with RJ Barrett, because first of all, I think one of the best parts about RJ is that he is an easy fit with a lot of different players. But I think to the extent that they can do this, and it's not always, oftentimes it's not your choice which star you get. You just get the one that is there and ready to come to you at the time they're willing to come to you. I think the team, if it's at all possible, needs to be very conscientious about who they pair with him, because they have a chance to get this really right with how good this kid is and what he's showing. And, I mean, if anybody listens to this podcast, I'm sure the numbers, but like, to come back from being essentially not playing basketball for 2 weeks and score 46 points and get to the free throw line 22 times and just do it in a way where he has never before been as in command of all of his faculties as he was in that game against Miami. And then I think in some ways it was even more encouraging to see him against Philadelphia, because it was the opposite. He wasn't, like, the shot wasn't falling, right? He wasn't having one of his better games. And yet his imprint on the game in a positive way was felt throughout. And whether it's, coming up with an offensive rebound on a miss or like a kick out, or like, this is a 21-year-old player who has figured it out. And it doesn't mean he's always going to be great. There's still some work to do, but it's all there and we could see it. It's right here. It's obvious for us. And I just, it'd be really great if they could figure out who is the ideal pairing for this guy. And I guess the reason I say it is because we were just talking about Donovan Mitchell. It's like he dominates a game. Like, it's the Donovan Mitchell show. It's like high pick and roll, high pick and roll, high pick and roll. Like, I don't know. Is that the, maybe beggars can't be choosers. Is that the ideal pairing for RJ Barrett? Like, I don't know. And I don't even know necessarily who that player would be, but I hope that they're already thinking about it. And that's the funny thing. I like, not to go back to Zion, but like, I could actually see a theoretical version of those two guys working pretty well. Anyway, say your RJ Barrett piece.
Well, who are you picking?
Very funny. I'm picking RJ Barrett.
Okay. Well, the funny thing about RJ, the one thing I'll push back on is you said he has it figured out. I don't think he does. And I think that's the awesome part, where he is figuring it out, but we don't even know how far along he can get. You know what I mean? Like you can see it coming together, but I also see Brandon Ingram doing a great job this season. He was already doing pretty well. And then it's like he's reaching levels that are much better. And I feel like that's similar with how RJ might be down the line, which is a scary thought if you are any opposing team having to deal with RJ Barrett. But, I'm not going to go with RJ on this one, partially because he is the obvious pick and because he has been picked. I'm actually going to go with Julius. The reason I'm going with Julius, I know, as it's because
what is happening?
It's because of the games before the break where I thought he actually played very well.
Oh,
the games after the break, he was terrible. Obviously, he's usually very, very bad outside of these weeks. Again, I could say RJ Barrett would be the boring, answer because it's already happened. So I'll go with the second player. I mean, you could. There are cases for other guys as well, but Andrew, you don't have to look at me like that.
No, he doesn't need to say anything because I'm gonna. Can I pick it up with detention?
You're that flabbergasted, but he had 2 good games before the season ended. Freudian slip before the season ended. With those, listen, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying he had a great week, but I'm saying if you're looking at the talent, the games he had leading up to the All-Star break, he was very good in those 2 games beforehand. He was showing like, hey, this could be the Julius that we've seen before. And then he does the same thing, which he always does. He goes into a break and then he comes back and he just wets the bed. He's terrible.
Okay.
So obviously it's RJ Barrett, but if I'm going to pick someone that's not RJ, I'm going to go with half of that, which is Julius Randle.
You just made my detention call so easy because I am now proudly going to give my detention to the man who you just gave your game ball to. And that's Julius Randle, because unlike you and most others, I am not going to point more than 33% of the blame for the season to Tom Thibodeau or to the front office or to Kemba Walker or to anyone else other than the guy who's supposed to be the best player on this team. And I think a lot of the pushback that I have gotten in terms of defending Tibbs this year is it's like, well, you criticize the players. You criticize the players all the time. Why don't you offer the same criticism to Tibbs? And that's fair. Here's the difference, though. We have video evidence of everything that Julius Randle has done, and more importantly, everything that he has not done. And the fact that he came back and he had the games that he had, not because the shot magically started dropping, but because he made the simple effort to start playing the right way with more consistency and with a little bit more effort. That, to me, only further infuriates me about his first, whatever you want to say, 50 games of the season.
But that's because the past. That's irrelevant to this. I understand.
We're not here to talk about the past.
We're here to talk about the week that started with the Thunder and has culminated with the Sixers. If we want to talk about that, everything before then, that's a different story. And
I refuse to give credit for him for after there are no more stakes and after the season has already officially slipped away. And after I guess he got what he wanted and he didn't get traded, he decided, you know what? All right, I'm going to show up and I'm going to give a shit. Like, disgraceful to me. And which is why I cannot wait to get him the hell out of here so fast this offseason. And I'm not saying trade him for anything. I'm not going to do that. But like, I know what I want the identity of this team to look like moving forward. And it's not with Julius Randle on it. And yes, that is a little bit colored by the fact that I had to watch him today. I don't know, completely fall asleep on how many backdoor cuts and like, it's all the same shit that we witnessed the whole year. And I cannot give him credit for that. And I will give him blame. That's fine.
You can listen, again, I'm talking about a 4-game sample size where 2 of them were not very good and 2 of them were actually very good. And I do agree with you though. I don't want to come off as like, hey, Julius Randle is a key piece here. I don't think that this team, when it gets too close to its ceiling, has Julius Randle anywhere near it, right? Like they're going to do something about it. And I have a serious concern that RJ and Julius cannot coexist to the point where they're both thriving. And I don't think it's a surprise or I don't think it's a coincidence rather that some of Julius's best games happened when RJ was not playing.
Yeah. You think that's an accident? Obviously.
Of course not. But that's my point. It's that Julius, in terms of how he played from these 4 games, 2 of them were not good. Don't get me wrong. 2 of them were great for the most part. I really felt they were. And when you look at the rest of the team and who was out there, like there really aren't a lot of candidates if you're not taking someone who's not named RJ Barrett. But the reason I can't put Julius in detention, I saw these 2 past games. They were not good. Don't get me wrong. But it's still the fact of like, yes, we can say, oh, well, when he wasn't giving a crap and all of that. And I hear you. I'm not pushing back. But again, if we're looking at this span of time, like I don't see it quite the same. I understand from a full season standpoint, it has been very, very below average. I think that there definitely needs to be something that's worked out this summer. Again, we just talked about Zion Williamson, which I'm loath to do, but like, and I know people have talked about like, oh, this pick and Zion and Julius for Zion. Like again, there's the financial issues there. It would probably send Pelicans into the tax. Pelicans have never paid the tax. There's a reason they don't like spending more money than they have to. We can figure out ways around it. The point I'm making here is that we can figure that out later. But in terms of with Julius, it's just those 2 games. I thought it's Tale of 2 Cities, Jekyll and Hyde, whatever you want to do. Detention. Yes, go ahead.
I think if I could just jump in, Jeremy, because I don't want to be disrespectful with the face I made. I was hoping the game ball that we were all going to collectively give was a celebration of RJ Barrett. That is more where I was going with this. I didn't think we were going to reach to give Julius a game ball or Quickly or someone else. I just thought collectively we could have been like, the only thing good worth celebrating right now is that we might have got one here. And that's where I thought the direction was going.
I would love to give RJ Barrett the game ball. I didn't go first.
I said we were going to do it collectively.
That's the point. Right, I was saying we all could give the same game ball to him. Fill RJ Barrett's trophy case.
Then in that case, sure. RJ Barrett gets it, obviously.
That's all.
46-point game. Should have gotten 50. Work on those free throws. Still had a lovely time seeing him. It was the bright spot of a otherwise.
Were you there?
Game. No, I was not.
Okay.
I was at the Sixers.
Who's your before we do predictions? Who's your detention? You want to give it the tips?
I'll give you a guess.
It's 100% tips.
Yeah, I'll give you a wild guess.
Tips. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, like like, what am I like? I'm looking at this list here. I just gave Julius Randle praise, right?
Listen,
we can talk about Mitchell Robinson. Listen, I understand their personal situation going on with his family.
No, it's Tibbs. Tibbs is the right.
It doesn't matter at this point to me. The bottom line is it's Tibbs. Like,
Tibbs is the right answer.
The fact that he said it was the young players that were at fault, and then you see the young players doing well in a game where they come back with the Sixers, and it just like, again, it goes back to the whole thing of he's not trying, and then he blames the youth, but he also doesn't consider the fact that the youth actually could help rest the starters and the key rotation players that are still veterans that are there, get the rest that they need to come back and feel a little bit healthier, or at least a little less tired. And it's just the stubbornness, and it's an 0-4 week. And listen, when you have as many blown 20-point leads as the Knicks do, that sure, you could say it's on the players. To me, that falls on coaching.
It's on everybody, but
sure,
the coach.
It's on everyone, but
the coach is part of everybody. That's fair. That's the right answer. Okay, we'll do predictions, and then we'll do a quick producer's corner. So I have not won in a dog's age. We'll see if I can get off that schneid tonight. Or this week, I should say. So the Knicks have 4 road games coming up. We get a couple days off. I did not even realize they don't play on Monday or Tuesday until I just looked at the dates, which Andrew conveniently put. So they're in Philly on Wednesday, in Phoenix on Friday night, in LA to face the Clippers of Los Angeles on Sunday late. And then you will not hear from Jeremy and I until next Wednesday. Right?
Well, yeah.
Next
Tuesday
next
night. We're
one,
recording next
Tuesday at midnight.
Yeah.
We're going to record Tuesday night because the Knicks play Sunday night and Monday night. So it's going to be a little bit of a wonky schedule for next week. And because they play the Kings on Monday night. So we're making our prediction for the next 8 days, I guess, as it were. Jeremy, you go first.
Damn right I do. Listen, I actually did the math, John. You got to win. If I win this week,
that's it. That's not okay.
And then I just run up the score from there.
Okay.
So Sixers, Suns, Clippers, Kings. I'll go 1-3.
Okay, you made my life easy. I'm going to go 2-2. I think that they will. I think they will surprise.
Okay, take it. Yeah, that's fine.
I thought you might go. 0-4. In which case, I would have had a difficult decision between 1-3 and 2-2. But I think when you went 1-3, I think 2-2 is an easy call for me.
I appreciate how optimistic you are about this road trip with the Sixers, Suns, and Clippers, and the fact that the Kings got better.
I know.
Okay.
Look, it's probably going to be 1-3. Of the other 2 options, I feel good about 2-2.
I didn't even feel good about 1-3. Like, honestly, it could be 0-4.
You can switch to 0-4.
Oh no, I'm saying with 1-3. I'm like, again, it could be 0-4 and I would still win. So, anyways, good luck.
You know what's wild, Jeremy? This team's so friggin' annoying that like the Warriors game just gets pulled out of their ass. And
but that's what I mean.
Like they
have another stretch in them like that is going to infuriate everybody. And I think it's going to happen soon.
I hope we can make it more of a competition.
I hope so too. Andrew, before we go, something from you.
Yeah, something for me. RJ Barrett scored 46 points in a basketball game, his career high. He is the second youngest Knick to get at least 46 points in a basketball game. And for Producer's Corner, we're going to go back to the I Know the Knicks Well and see. Well, Jeremy, I'm so sorry. John's been doing this thing in the newsletter, the 75 greatest Knicks. So he's at a very large advantage here. You have the predictions for this season. I'm just letting you know he may clean up here. So what we're going to do is we'll do the strikes where you get to go back and forth. But I went and looked at Knicks history. Do you know that it's only happened 28 times that a Knicks player has scored at least 46 points in a basketball game? And it's by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different players to do it. So guys, who are the 12 players in Knicks history to score at least 46 points in a basketball game?
All right, Jeremy can go first.
Carmelo Anthony.
Did it 3 times, scored 50, 62, and 46.
Patrick Ewing.
Also did it 3 times. Scored 51, 50, and 46.
Jamal Crawford.
Very good call, Jeremy. Hold on. Jamal Crawford did it once. Scored 52 points.
Bernard King.
The most in Knicks history by Bernard King. 6 different times. 50, 50, 52, 60, 46, and 55.
This is where it's going to get a little harder for me.
Well, okay. So this way there's a clear winner. RJ Barrett's obviously one of them. So I'll cross him off the list. There's now 11 players you guys have to figure out. You've named 4 of them.
I want to say, Stephon Marbury.
Incorrect. Strike 1. John.
I looked it up yesterday or the day before.
I smell collusion. Just saying. I'm putting.
Well, no, the guy who has the record that RJ missed by 1 point, Carl Braun's the answer. He scored 47. I think it was December 6th.
December 6th of what year?
1947. 47. Which was 25 years before RJ Barrett's dad was born.
Yes. Carl Braun is correct.
Is it me again?
No, Jeremy.
Jeremy. Okay.
You just now have the lead.
We'll end this soon. Trying to think. Michael Ray Richardson? I don't know.
Incorrect.
Yeah.
Strike 2 for Jeremy.
Let's see. What do I want to go with?
Again, this is Knicks that have scored at least 46 points in a
I'm actually not 100% sure about this, but I'll go McAdoo.
Incorrect.
Okay.
Strike 1 for John. Jeremy. Knicks who score 46 points in a basketball game.
46 points.
Yes.
I don't feel good about this answer, but Nate Robinson.
Incorrect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
strike
not a bad
for
guess.
Jeremy.
How many more can 42. You name? How many more can I name? Did Willis Reed do it?
Yes, did it twice. 46 and 53. These before the 3-point era guys are interesting. Yeah. Also, RJ Barrett did it on the fewest amount of field goal attempts, 22.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a hint, John. There's a guy that's done it 5 times that you haven't mentioned.
That's done 5 times that I haven't mentioned?
Yes. And then there's
isn't it my turn though? Because John.
No, you're 3 strikes. You got 3 strikes.
3 strikes in.
I'm out now. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it one of the really old
5
guys?
5 strikes this time.
Yes.
It's one of the really old guys?
Yes.
Is it Gallatin?
No.
So that's my second strike, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it's not Gallatin, was it God, McGuire didn't score that much. Wasn't Clifton.
There's a very boomer portion of the podcast that's listening right now and yelling at their however they're listening to this podcast.
Did Frazier do it 5 times?
No, he did not.
Okay, I didn't think so.
So rapid fire, any other names you guys want to suggest?
DeBusschere.
It wasn't Dick McGuire.
DeBusschere, no. Dick McGuire, no.
DeBusschere never scored that many.
Dick Barnett, no.
Dick Barnett, no. No, not Gallatin or Braun, but oh my God.
So I'll give you the year of a couple of them. So this one guy did it 5 times, did it in 59, 61, and then 3 times in 1962.
Oh my God.
The point totals were 57, 51.
I know.
50,
it's when they were terrible.
47 and 46.
I just wrote about this player not long ago too. That's the worst part.
Jeremy, there are 2 others on this list that you know.
That's a great hint.
I'm just saying that it's not like
I like how you're shoveling hints to John while he's still alive.
But when I'm thing there, I had to say about
here's your turn. You get to
hold
go.
on. Did Stoudemire ever do it?
Stoudemire never did it. I'm saying there are 2 guys that were played when you followed the Knicks. We don't have to go back. Allen Houston did it twice. He scored 53 and then 50.
Houston, that was probably an obvious one.
Sprewell did it twice. He scored 49 and 48.
Okay,
love it.
There you go. So we're missing just the one, the guy who did it in the late 50s?
No, you're missing 2 others that did it once that I'd actually be impressed if you ever got it. One has a lore to his career and his legacy, but
Did like Spencer Haywood do it?
Spencer Haywood did it once, scored 47 points. The Spencer Haywood rule. Yeah.
Oh, did Bellamy ever do it?
No.
Bellamy never did it.
You're not going to know this one guy. I don't think you will. He did it in 1961. Willie Knowles did it once.
Willie Knowles was a really, really good player.
Okay.
A great player.
And then there's one other guy that did it 5 times you haven't mentioned.
It's the obvious name that is on the. I'm blanking. Who is it?
Richie Guerin.
Guerin. Jesus Christ.
Guerin did it 5 times.
Yeah.
He says after winning, congratulations.
Yeah. Only won 3-2. So it's not.
No, I was blanking. It's Gladden.
Gallatin.
It's Braun, and Guerin is the guy I was forgetting. That's my bad. Anyway, okay. Well, I won.
You
Let's
did.
go producer's corner.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I go to trivia every chance I can with producer's corner.
Yeah, no, I love it. Okay. Well, on that note, Andrew, thank you.
John, you're welcome.
Jeremy, thank you.
John, you're welcome.
And most of all, thank you out there, our loyal listeners. Thank you for, even if you may be disenchanted with this team, thank you for sticking with the Knicks Film School podcast. Don't forget, we will have a normal slate of episodes back, including I'm fairly certain, I need to confirm this, but a draft podcast coming up very soon in which we'll begin to talk about some of the things that we could actually look forward to this upcoming off season. So yeah, stay tuned for that coming up very soon, along with all of our usual post game recaps and what have you. And until next time, have a very good week.